almost the same analysis, but that's the 2015 note, assuming the 20-year average. That's where your variable rate would be 3%. That corresponds to a LIBOR rate of 2.16%. The numbers are about the same. I'm not going to go into a lot. It's, about $1 million difference and about $45, $50,000 reduction. 8 and 9. So you're right. When donkeys fly, or the wonderful thing is that LIBOR is what it is today for the rest of the time. But the question is, I think that an important study here is, what is the break-even rate? What variable rate would you need to experience if you just stayed the course and kept your loan outstanding? What variable rate would you need to not do any worse than the bond that's available in the market today? So the break-even variable rate to the bond issue is 4.2%, which corresponds to LIBOR being 3.93%. So you can see, in the far right column, it just solves it to a wash to the bond issue. Okay. So that is your break-even. If you said or knew or felt comfortable that I could achieve an average rate of 4.2% over the remaining 22 years, you do as good as a bond. Sure, you'd have a little upside, or you might have a little downside in given years. But just as you say, the wonderful best case scenario is that it stays at 2.94. That's not going to happen. I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree. But I think it's also fair to say it's not going to go to 5 or stay there. Could it? Yes.
We don't know.
We don't know, and I'm not.
It could go up. It could go down. It could stay the same.
And that's not what I'm representing either side of it.
Yeah.
So, what I want to take away from that break-even variable rate is that it's a comparison to the current LIBOR rate or bank loan rate compared to the break-even rate. It's lines 3 and 4. The difference between the current variable rate would be 2.94%, and the break-even is 4.2%. So that's an increase of 1.26%. Correspondingly, the difference in the LIBOR is 1.86%. Okay, now we're getting back to LIBOR. LIBOR is a short-term variable rate because it's a floating rate. People always think about prime. Prime is not a short-term rate. Prime is a little bit more of a longer-term rate. So typically when we've structured loans that will go variable, such as yours, we've always asked the bank to use a LIBOR index compared to a prime rate index, because if you're going to go variable and you're going to do a floating rate, you want to use the lowest index, because that's what's going to get you the lowest floating rate. So we're talking about LIBOR needing to go up 1.86% to get to that break-even, before you ever get to that break-even rate. LIBOR moves pretty much in tandem with Fed movements. Fed usually moves in quarter points. Sure, they throw in a 0.5% every once in a while when things get a little extreme one way or the other and they're trying to catch up. But the reference point I want you to take away from that is an increase, the bullet point at the bottom, an increase of 1-month LIBOR of approximately 1.6 is the equivalent of approximately 7 quarter-point Fed moves. So you say to me, when would the 2.07 LIBOR become 3.93? About 7 Fed moves. Same crystal ball.
2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I mean, how many rises have we had in the last couple of years?
7.
We've had 7
Yes.
rises in the last 2 years.
There was one in December of 15. There's one in December of 16.
Okay.
I think there was 3 in 17 and 2 in 18.
So just for the record, in 2 years we've had 7 Fed rate hikes.
Yes.
So in theory, perhaps in 2 more years we could have 7 more hikes.
Interest rates have never been historically low as they have been now. That is the only reason that the Feds have started to raise the rates after the decline of 2008. If you look at a 62-year chart rate of the feds, you can find it on Market Watch, Forbes, any of those financial websites, you'll see historically you don't have the big dips and things like that. The only reason it's gone up 7 times in the last few years is because the rates were so low to begin with.
And because the economy is overheating and inflation's going up.
Can I interrupt and say, if we said to you, see what you can do for us, what is it that you would do for us?
Well, it sounds like you want to explore, move forward with locking in a rate. That, when you say what would I do, I mean, I want to know what you're trying to achieve. It sounds like that's what you want to do, and believe me, I'm not, I hope you're not taking this presentation swaying either way. I'm just trying to, present facts, analysis based on historical data. Because we all know what historical data is. You're right, nobody has a crystal ball, or again, if I started quoting the future, you'd be throwing me out of the room, or at least I hope you would.
What I mean is,
What would I do? Yes.
what procedure would you go through to make sure that we were doing something that was best for the people who are paying this bill?
If your goal is to reduce your exposure, is that correct, that that's what you're looking to do? Then I would propose that you proceed with a bank RFP, because that's something we can do rather expeditiously. See if we can get a bank. I know people talk that, banks are 50-50. Well, the answer is you don't get what you don't ask for. So you go through that process. You don't disband it. You don't say, well, I don't think it's going to be very good. That's my job, is to get through that process for you. So we would propose to proceed with a bank RFP, solicit those proposals, and at the same time start the process of getting you ready for a bond issue. So that, again, if the bond issue, once we got those proposals in, those time periods would dovetail pretty well. That we would do the bank RFP because we can move that pretty quickly. And it takes, probably a month or maybe a little bit more to prepare an official statement, an offering document, and get you a rating. I mean, the township hasn't had a rating. So, that timing would dovetail that hopefully we should have the proposals in hand to get a real proposal or a real view of what the banks will offer and compare that to the bond issue. And then make an informed decision based on facts of A, is the bank loan and the bond issue better? And B, of that better one, do you like it better than staying the course and just letting the loan be as it is?
Yeah, I think you very accurately described what we're looking to accomplish.
Okay.
Sure.
Can we ask, what would be the fee to initiate that process?
My fee?
Yes.
I would propose $17,500. And that fee is basically contingent upon a successful closing. Meaning, if we go through the process and or the bond issue, and ultimately it does proceed a better outcome than what you have, it's been a pleasure working for you.
And what would be the approximate cost, do you think, if we went the bond issue, what would that cost?
Not knowing what everybody's costs are,
Can you give us like a
yeah,
range?
150,000, but that's all factored into.
Oh, I understand.
Okay,
Right.
okay, yeah,
We would hypothetically amortize that over the
absolutely,
loan.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think you want to pay it out of pocket. So, I mean, 150, 175, 200, again, it's what gets you the lowest interest rate or the lower payment. Going through the process of doing a bond issue, you bid it out. We do most of our bond financings over the internet through an auction platform, so that what we're asking the underwriters to bid on is the lowest true interest cost. That's a combination of the interest rate they offer and what their fee is. People always say, well, which one do I want? And the answer is whatever gets you the lowest true interest cost, or conversely, the lowest annual payment, for the best result.
Could I ask, Do bonds require, what do you call that, a township vote in order to get a bond enacted? And second question is, what type of do bonds, would this bond be specific to the sewer plant and not a general bond that would obligate the entire town? I don't know whether I said that wording quite right.
I think I know what you're getting at. So, again, it's a financing. So the bond would be you don't have an authority.
No.
Based
No.
upon the current structure that you have a general obligation note. It would be either be a new.
Township.
Yes,
We have that.
that's what we have right
That's
now.
what we have right
Yeah,
now.
Okay.
it would either be a new general obligation note, loan, or a general obligation bond. But certainly, the plan and the intent is, and the all expectation is that it ultimately gets paid by the sewer revenues.
Absolutely.
If we stay the course, there is no fee.
I'm sorry?
If they stay the course on the current note, there is no fee.
That's
We go
correct.
out to RFP, that's what we're saying.
I have a question about that.
Mhm.
So, you're taking a big risk to do the same amount of work if you can't come up with a better deal for us.
Unfortunately or honestly, that's the way this business works.
But you have to be pretty confident that you're gonna get a better deal.
No, I don't. No, I'm not. I have a relationship with this township. And in a perfect world, you know what I'd like to propose? I'd like to propose, and I think it's more appropriate because some people say we have a conflict of interest. Because they'd say, well, it jades me to push you to do a deal because that's how I get paid. In a perfect world, I'd like to propose that, I'm not gonna do this, but I hope you take it from pure candor is, I'd like to propose that I get paid some amount to provide advice to you. I think I already did that tonight,
That would make sense.
but that's not the way this business seems to work. It's a contingent fee arrangement, and I hope you're taking away from this my candor is, I didn't want to come in here and sell you to do something. I wanted to present facts and analysis to you that I've seen, and this data is historical data. All the crystal ball stays outside the room. So I believe ultimately you're gonna do the best thing for yourself based upon your needs, your objectives, budgetary, certainly budgetary and otherwise. And if you want to, as I sometimes say, marry the red line, set it and forget it, then that's your decision. You folks are the policymakers, together with your administrative staff. And if, that benefit or reduced exposure starts becoming a little bit more narrow, you'd say, well, we're already not taking a budget hit, above the 645, so let's sort of stay the course. And we understand what that break even is, that break even being, the 4.2%.
When you calculated these differences on page 3, were those fees and such calculated into these rates?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Into the rates and rolled into the financing.
Financing of it.
So it's
Of
in
the
the
total
debt
number.
service. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Did I not say that before?
No,
Okay.
yeah, nice job.
No, you didn't, that's the presentation.
Thank you. So if others in the public would like to see this presentation, how can that be made available?
Can you make some copies of this, Kevin, and
Put it on the website too.
just put it on the website? Thank you.
Sure. I had a couple bullet points can I, just on page 5? It's just some other considerations of completing a bond issue, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, should you decide to move forward. The township has not had and does not have any public bonds. With the bond issue will come, and this is kind of my whole full disclosure. With the bond issue does come additional administrative costs and oversight compared to what you've experienced with the bank loan over the past 3 years. That includes annual financial reporting requirements of the public markets. People call that continuing disclosure. If those of you who may be familiar with that. You know, it's an annual posting of information to a electronic repository. You know, the township does not have a bond rating, so you need to obtain, if you were gonna proceed with bond, you need to obtain that and maintain it. The township's audits are currently done on a cash basis. For the public market, they're usually a little bit more attuned to seeing, you know, modified accrual, which are GAAP compliant. And the lady to my right already hit the last one. The 2015 note is prepayable at any time without penalty, whereas a bond issue would have a no 5-year no prepayment.
Can I ask you a question about the bond rating? Are there any other advantages for a township to have a bond rating other than issuing bonds?
Typically not.
Okay, that's the only reason you would do it.
Yeah, every once in a while I get a call from a manager that says they're filling out a insurance, like if you're doing your property insurance.
Property and casualty.
Property, sometimes I ask you what your bond rating is, I'm not quite sure why, but I've never got that.
You can charge you more.
But, no. You know, sometimes banks ask for it, you know, and my answer always is, if you don't have one, no, you don't have, you don't have public debt, there's no reason to get it. Why would you go to that expense? Questions? Or what can I do to follow up?
I think you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it?
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darrell. Be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale.
Always helpful, Darrell. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
What are we up to?
Police report.
We're at police. Under police, did receive from BCD copies of the survey legal assessments, which I did email out to the 4 participating municipalities. Received back up with Fred's. I did receive back from the chief, Maxie, what he could complete from his portion. I have to finish completing that. And I'm still waiting for Perkiomen and for Southgate. So that's the update on that. Tom, you want to talk about line painting?
My thing is that we're gonna, with consideration, I'm gonna go out for 3 phone coats, get the lines painted.
What is the obligation at the circle? Is that us or can someone
It's
else
the
do
state.
it? The state
I'm trying to work with Marcy.
That the obligation is ours. We got stuck with that when we did it.
Oh, that's right. I'm trying to get the state to pay for that, though.
But that's not, this is just a white and yellow line paint, that has nothing to do with, because that's also thermal there as well. And we let that go until PennDOT tells us. Because of the,
It was $18,000 last time we did it, it's
Just for the
pricey.
circle?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it'd be great if we could get someone else to do
Yeah, I have to break a set
that. Wow. Oh, my gosh.
I'll do it for 7.25.
That's too long, let me tell you.
No, it doesn't.
I'll tell you 5.
every,
Unless, but you gotta give me a coffee a while.
I think we've done it 4 times.
Wow.
It's like 3 to 4 years at last.
So you need to vote for that?
You're not gonna paint that.
No,
No, but you need a vote
let's
to
go.
get the 3 bids?
It's
Just gonna
just gonna do it,
Okay.
just acknowledgement.
No,
Okay.
yeah, just go get the bids and
And
then
telephone
we'll
bids, and
decide.
then when we get a quote to accept, you guys will approve it.
Question back here, Kevin.
What's that? Are we taking
Oh,
questions
can
from
we
reports?
wait till a public comment section
Sure.
to hold your question? So we get through this?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Under my
Yeah.
report, you have in your packet information from Visual Sound for purchase of a visual projection services for the boardroom in the amount of $10,880. That includes projector, wireless connectivity, electric plate, to be constructed on the, behind the board chairs. That would allow not only for wireless access, but also for audio, come a time that we decide either to update our microphone system or allow that to be used with the projector itself.
So does this replace our system or just replace the pieces that need to be replaced?
No, this doesn't replace anything with the audio. It just allows for future hookup for audio.
But it includes the projector?
Includes the projector, the brackets, the internet capability, cabling, wall plate, and lens and projector.
Do we need to get a service plan with that?
That would be an additional cost.
But what I'm saying is, what's the lifespan on these? I mean, do they?
Depends how hard it gets used. I mean, you know, in our case, probably not very much,
Yeah.
but it would be nice to have that capability. With the 1-year service plan, it's $11,376, and with the 3-year, it's $12,278.
So on the last page is a list of all the pieces, so in theory, if your middle zoom lens had to be replaced, that would be $1,347. So you probably wouldn't have to replace the whole thing,
Correct.
right? You could just replace an item if
Or
you
a
had
bracket
to.
goes bad, or cabling.
Plus labor.
Yeah. But it's not like you have to replace the whole thing, you
No.
have to replace the part.
Just replace the part.
Would a service plan include bulbs?
No.
We'll go down to
I don't think so, no.
Lions will help us out there.
Can we get clarification, so this is only for the boardroom?
This is only for the board.
Okay, because I was just asking, because earlier in the meeting, we talked about doing electronic submissions of plans, which means this room maybe should be considered.
Or you can go home.
We don't really need one. Well, I think it'd be for planning commission would use them, and potentially zoning hearing board would use
But
them.
they would use them out there,
And that's
would they?
always in the other room.
Okay.
And I guess in theory, if we needed to use a projector, we could just meet in the other
Just
room.
use the other room.
Yeah, that would be a.
In this room, we've been able to open plans, it's very comfortable to do that in this room when there's a small group, but yeah, if you want to project, you can get it in the next room, that makes sense.
Do you have a recommendation about whether or not it's necessary to have a service plan? I mean, do you know anything about the
Again, if
the
it's,
record of these kind of systems?
I mean, you're guaranteed for a year, I believe. You have a year warranty anyway, or 30, now it's only 30 days. If it's used properly and used the way it should be, I probably could last for 10, 20 years, I would think. You might have to replace the bulb, again, depending on the amount of usage.
The only proposal we got.